You're 52 years old, and somebody at work asks what you're doing this weekend. You say nothing, and you mean it. Not nothing as in you haven't decided yet, nothing as in that's the plan. That's the whole plan. And it sounds perfect. My name's Frank, and today we're going to talk about something nobody's really broken down honestly. Why so many people your age are single right now, and whether that's a problem or a choice. Because the answer is stranger than you think. It's both, at the same time, and it started way before you ever went on your first date. Right now, about 31% of Americans between 40 and 54 are not living with a spouse or a partner. That's almost 1 in 3, and that number has been climbing for decades, up from about 24% back in 1990. Pew Research confirmed it in their analysis of census data. We're not talking about people between relationships. We're talking about people who've been on their own for years, sometimes by choice, sometimes by circumstance, and sometimes by a combination that's hard to untangle. And if you're in that group, you already know. You're not sitting around crying about it. You've got a routine. You've got your space set up the way you want it. You eat when you want. You sleep diagonally across the bed. You watch what you want without negotiating with somebody who somehow has opinions about every show on earth but can never pick one. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. A lot of people your age didn't stumble into being single. They built toward it without realizing it for most of their lives. And the blueprint started at home. You grew up in a house where the marriage wasn't great. Maybe your parents fought. Maybe they didn't fight, and somehow that was worse because the silence told you everything. You saw two people who were supposed to love each other operate like roommates who couldn't stand the sound of each other chewing. And at some point, maybe when you were 10 or 11, you made a quiet little decision in your head. You said, that's not going to be me. Now, here's what nobody explains to a kid. When you make that decision, I'm not going to repeat that. Your brain doesn't just file it away. It rewires how you handle closeness. Researchers at Baylor University found that adults whose parents divorced show more discomfort with closeness, a stronger tendency to pull away from people, and less secure attachment styles than people who grew up in intact families. They even found lower levels of oxytocin. That's the hormone your body uses to bond with other people. It's not just emotional, it's chemical. So you didn't just learn that relationships can fail, your nervous system learned it. And it started building walls before you were old enough to know what a wall was. That's why a lot of people your age have this pattern. You meet someone. It's good for a while. Then the minute it gets serious, the minute someone starts depending on you or you start depending on them, something in your chest tightens. You start finding problems. You start needing space. You don't leave because you're cruel. You leave because something ancient in you just said, get out before this turns into what you saw. And you're not alone in that. Gen X has a marriage rate of about 36%, compared to 48% for boomers and 65% for the silent generation at the same point in life. A lot of your generation just never walked down the aisle. Not because they couldn't, because some part of them wasn't sure it was safe. But here's where it gets complicated, because a huge number of people your age did get married. They tried it, and a lot of those marriages ended. And the pattern of how those marriages fell apart is almost identical from couple to couple. A divorce mediator named Julie Gentili, who's been doing this for over 25 years, says about 80% of Gen X divorces she handles are initiated by women. And the story is always the same. The wife spent years asking for change. She told him the load was uneven. She told him she was drowning. She told him at year 5, year 8, year 12, and he'd change for about 3 days, maybe 3 weeks. Sometimes 3 months if she really put her foot down. Then he'd slide back, because the old way was easier. And every time he slid back, she lost a little more trust. Until one day she walked into a lawyer's office and he had no idea it was coming. And the husbands? Gentili says they almost always say the same thing. She told me, I just didn't think she'd actually leave. The men who initiate? Usually about 20%. And their complaint is almost always the same too. The marriage became physically empty. No intimacy, sometimes once or twice a year. And when Gentili calls the wife to hear her side, the wife says the same thing every time. Why would I want to be close to someone who doesn't hear me? So both people have a real complaint, and both people are too exhausted to fix it. Because here's the thing nobody told your generation. You were sold the boomer marriage model with one upgrade. Girls and boys are equal now. Women should work too. Great, except nobody renegotiated the rest of the deal. So Gen X women ended up working full-time and still doing most of the domestic work, most of the emotional labor, most of the parenting. And after 15 or 20 years of that, they didn't just want out of the marriage, they wanted out of the role. Now here's the part that keeps researchers up at night. A 2021 study from Barna Group and Marriage Helper found that only 47% of Gen Xers said they were very satisfied with their marriage. Compare that to 65% of millennials and 61% of boomers. Gen X, the generation known for toughing everything out, is the least satisfied in their marriages, and yet only 17% had even considered getting help. Millennials? 29% had thought about counseling. Gen X won't even pick up the phone. And that's the pattern. You don't ask for help. You don't talk about it at dinner. You just absorb and absorb until one day you stop absorbing and start leaving, or you never get in deep enough to need to leave at all. So what happens after the divorce, or after you've been single for 15 years and you start to wonder if something is actually wrong with you? Nothing is wrong with you, but something did happen to you. You were raised by people who weren't great at being close, and you internalize that as normal. You learned that love looks like endurance, not connection. That a good partner is someone who stays, not someone who actually shows up. And when real closeness finally came knocking, the kind where someone sees you, really sees you, you didn't know what to do with it, so you backed up. Or you picked someone safe, meaning someone who wouldn't push you to open up. And that felt comfortable for a while, until it didn't. A team of researchers studied nearly 3,000 unpartnered people across 4 generational cohorts: Gen X, early millennials, late millennials, and Gen Z. They found something that surprised almost everyone. The later-born groups, millennials and Gen Z especially, reported more satisfaction with being single. But Gen X? They were the comparison group, the baseline, the ones who got to singlehood the hard way, through divorce, through avoidance, through picking partners who reminded them of the chaos they grew up in. And by the time they got to their late 40s and 50s, a lot of them had just accepted it. Not happily, not tragically, just, this is what it is. And that acceptance is doing something interesting, because once you stop chasing a relationship to prove you're not broken, you start building a life that actually works. You renovate the house yourself. You take the trip alone and realize it's better without someone who complains about the temperature of every room. You build friendships that go deeper than most people's marriages, because you're not saving your emotional energy for a partner who's never going to use it right. Pew Research found that among adults 40 and older, women are more likely to be unpartnered than men. And here's why that matters. Women at this age are more likely to have strong friend networks, more likely to get emotional support from people outside a romantic relationship, and more likely to say they're doing fine without a partner. That's not bitterness, that's math. If you can get your emotional needs met without someone who leaves his socks on the kitchen counter, why would you sign back up? Men have a harder time with this, and the data backs it up. Single men over 40 earn less, are less likely to be employed, and report worse financial outcomes than partnered men. It's not that marriage makes men richer, it's that the kind of stability a partnership provides gives some men the structure they need to perform better at work and in life. Take that away, and a lot of men don't have the support network to replace it. Women have friends. Men have a partner, or they have nobody. So what's really happening with your generation is this. The people who got married are sitting in houses wondering if they made the right call. The people who got divorced are rebuilding lives they didn't expect. And the people who never married are waking up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday in total silence, drinking coffee that's exactly the right temperature, and wondering why everyone else seems so stressed. And all 3 groups have something in common. They all saw the same broken model when they were young. They all decided they'd do it differently. And they all did, just not in the way they expected. About 70% of marriages that happened in the 1990s, prime Gen X territory, lasted at least 15 years. That's actually up from 65% in the 2 decades before. So here's the strange truth. When your generation actually commits, You're better at staying married than the people who raised you. The problem was never commitment. It was entry, getting in the door in the first place, because the door looks a lot like the one you walked through as a kid, and you remember what was on the other side. If you're single right now, whether that's by choice, by divorce, or by a slow drift that happens so gradually you didn't even notice, you're not broken. You're not missing out. You're running a program that your childhood installed, and you've been running it so long it feels like your personality. But it's not. It's a strategy, a smart one, actually, when you were 8, just maybe not the one you need at 52. You don't have to get married. You don't have to date. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But if you ever catch yourself saying, "I'm fine alone," and it sounds a little too rehearsed, like something you've said so many times it lost its meaning, maybe sit with that for a second. Because "I'm fine alone" and "I'm afraid of not being fine with someone" sound exactly the same from the outside, and only you know which one it really is. That's all Frank's got for you today. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.